I look different in this part of the video because I had to re-record it due to technical difficulties. Anyway, the slippery slope is trying to resemble a modus tollens argument. It starts with a conditional statement, if P, then Q, and it tries to deduce not P, but the problem is that it doesn't show not Q as part of the evidence. It shows a bunch of other bits of evidence that is not actually deducible from if P then Q. Therefore, it's not evidence at all. So it's not that the evidence provided in a slippery slope argument is irrelevant. It's that it can't be deduced from your assumption, from the foundation that you take to be true without question, that that forms the basis of your argument. So what you have here are just more assumptions, not evidence. So we only have two of the three necessary components for a valid argument. We have two assumptions and one conclusion. We have if P, then Q, R, and S, and T, and U, and V. This is a set of conjunctions. This center dot between each of these variables represents the word and. So if we have these as assumptions, you can actually deduce any of these. Let's say premise 1, usually we'd be going vertically here, but I don't have enough space, sorry. Premise 1, we can say R. Premise 2, we can say V. Okay? In a conjunction, any parts of it can stand alone, can be deduced from that conjunction. But still, we need to show some connection between one of these things and this, and somehow deduce not Q in order to produce not P. So we would need another assumption, Let's say, again, we'd be going vertically here under normal conditions. Let's say that you also have the conditional statement, if R, then not Q. Well, in this case, we could deduce not Q, premise 3, from assumption 2 and assumption 3. See how that works? So we have all three components for a valid argument. Super. We have assumptions, 3 of them actually. We have a premise, not Q. Finally, we've gotten Q from R as the result of producing another assumed conditional statement. And from not Q, of course, we can deduce not P via modus tollens. But when you apply logic like this to the real world, you have to agree on what you're assuming to be true. You have to set a foundation for your argument. And your set of assumptions is logically your foundation. So if we say this, if we vote for Donald Trump, then he becomes president. And then if we use as evidence of that, that conclusion we want to draw that we should not vote for Donald Trump, say, that he is a racist, a sexist, a transphobe, that he's totally rude, and a victim blamer, we have to show a connection between one of those things. Those become assumptions because we can't deduce any of those things from this conditional statement. Then we have to connect one of those things, at least, with the idea that it is a bad idea for Donald Trump to become president so that we can deduce the antecedent of the conditional statement that we should not vote for him. So essentially, you have to agree on what you assume to be true. You have to agree on the foundations. And so the bottom line, as simply as I can put it, is that showing relevance of evidence in a slippery slope argument, or in any logically fallacious argument, so to speak, means that not that you have to show the relevance of the evidence itself to what it is you're trying to prove, but that you have to come to an agreement on your foundation, on the basis for your argument, what you take to be true before you start arguing at all. So I'll post a link to my my Otuja method below. I wrote a blog post about this logical decision-making process. Otuja stands for observe, think, understand, judge, act. You can't do anything with any meaning until you understand what's going on. So you can't formulate a judgment and take proper action in a situation until you understand that. And to get to a place of understanding, whether it's just in understanding of someone else's viewpoint or understanding what is true, you have to impartially observe and critically think about the evidence that is provided. And so if the more two people are doing that, and the more they value truth as the goal and understanding as the thing that they are to share in that interaction, then you're not going to get logical validity, So it really comes down to what you take to be true before you start arguing at all. And it also comes down to valuing truth itself, which, if we use this example, if you want to argue that you should not vote for Donald Trump on the basis that he's a racist, a sexist, a transphobe, totally rude, and a victim blamer, without showing why any of these are actually true, nor while showing any connection between these and the idea that Donald Trump being president is a bad prospect, then you can't get anywhere. You're not making sense, right? You're just not. So this is the slippery slope argument. It's essentially a modus tollens argument where you're trying to deduce P, but you're not showing not Q. Many logical fallacies are actually extremely similar from a formal standpoint. In fact, the red herring argument is the affirmative version of the slippery slope. While you're trying to show a negation in a slippery slope argument, you're trying to show an affirmative in the red herring. You raise a bunch of distracting evidence to prove something true, rather than raise a bunch of irrelevant evidence to disprove something that's raised. So, interesting logical connection between red herring and slippery slope, and there are many other examples we could provide too. We can always break an argument down to its logical form, and the form of that argument determines relevance, not the content itself, and certainly not anything of an empirical or scientific nature, because science does not inform logic. Logic and mathematics and deductive systems inform inductive systems, such as science, because scientific knowledge is a posteriori, and which means it's validated and justified by things outside of it, while deductive systems like logic are self-justifying. Therefore, they need no validation from the outside, no information from the outside, and essentially they can be applied to anything. They're foundations, which raises the deeper moral question here when you commit a logical fallacy in trying to produce some sort of conclusion without showing justification for that conclusion. What you're doing is really taking a consequentialist moral action. Consequentialism is basically the moral school of thought in philosophy that the end justifies the means. And this is another argument, of course, but I don't think that you should ever act specifically to produce a consequence. I think you should act from principle. And sometimes consequences from the past can inform the principles on which you're founding your thinking and your actions. But we need a solid moral framework from which to act, and logic can certainly help you do that. Just having logical coherence, and again, the fact that you need to assume something to be true before um, before you make a valid argument about anything. I think if we were to assume anything, it should be that truth exists, because in a relativistic world, nothing makes sense because you don't have a foundation. You can create your own conclusions, and that will be justified as long as that conclusion is fulfilled. But that's going to lead to, well, a lot of things, a lot of places that we don't want to go to, I think. So essentially, you want to act from principle. You want to act with the fact that truth exists in mind. In a relativistic world, even the statement truth is relative can't hold, because you have to presuppose certain things to be true for that statement to be true and understood by anyone. So logical coherence just holds things together. It helps us make sense of things. And so taking some logic, learning some logic is really like taking the intellectual red pill, Once you develop a sixth sense for it, you'll never read anything or hear an argument the same ever again. The errors will just pop out at you, and the inconsistencies will pop out at you, and your bullshit filter will be quite sharp. And from there, you can develop a sort of moral framework. In conjunction, I would say, with your intuition, because your intuition, even if you're an atheist, even if you're an anti-realist or something philosophically and don't believe that logic has much value, we still have intuition, and that intuition tells us when things aren't quite right. And I think that the study of logical fallacies actually formalizes what we already know to be true if we really tune in with ourselves and with that intuition. So hope that wasn't too verbose. Hope you understand the formal errors underlying the slippery slope argument a little bit better now, and maybe a little more about logic. Anyway, see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.